Station, this is Houston. Are you ready for the event?
And we are ready.
JSC PAO, this is Houston. Please call station for a voice check.
Station, this is JSC PAO. How do you hear me?
Hi, Rob. We're reading loud and clear.
Go ahead, Mark.
Thanks. This is Mark Carreau for Aviation Week and Space Technology, and I'm asking for either Ron or Katie Coleman to use your personal and professional experiences to place the two anniversaries today in some sort of perspective.
To use our personal and professional experience to place these two together. The fact that we're looking at 50 years of spaceflight, and 50 years ago, the first human left the planet and, orbited our planet, orbited our Earth, and now, just 50 years later, living in space is considered to be practically normal. The fact that my, fourth grade son, his classmates think that it's perfectly normal that his mother calls from space and helps with homework. We've really come a very, very long way. And each of these kinds of journeys, I think, starts with both big steps and small steps. I mean, to leave the planet is a big step, but before you do that, there's some very, very important small steps that have to happen. And we have to have patience through those small steps. And so I think that it's really great when we have a day like today where we can look back and recognize the big steps when we're sometimes in the midst of the small ones, and it reminds us of the greater goal, which is to explore our universe.
This is Jim Oberg with NBC. A question for all the crew here. You have a great spacecraft, but I want to ask you, aside from the engines, what is lacking or what still needs work to have a vehicle that could take a crew out of low Earth orbit into deep space for a year or more when they say, "Poyechali ka Marsu," let's go to Mars? What else do you have to develop on the station to have that ability?
Hi, Jim. That's a good question. I think, if you imagine the space station being propelled out, beyond Earth orbit and on its way to Mars, we have a lot of what we would need for that journey. We've got methods to keep the crew healthy. We've got exercise equipment. Really, I think the limiting factor would be that we are really dependent on resupply from Earth on a fairly frequent basis. So, we would have to, we do a lot of recycling on board. We have a lot of systems that, make use of water recycling and other things to limit how much resupply we need. But we need to take that a little bit further and have really a closed life support system, one that doesn't need constant resupply. So I think obviously we need a lot more fuel and a lot bigger engines. But I think the supply part of the equation, I think, is something that we need to work on a little bit, and is one of the things that we're learning here.
Hi, this is Robert Perlman with CollectSpace.com and Space.com. The International Space Station doesn't have a lot of decorations, but I think I see off to your side a picture of Gagarin floating there that may have been from the service module. It's been there since the beginning. What does it mean to you as a crew to have a picture of Gagarin on board on this anniversary, and why is it special to have him as part of the space station? Thanks.
This is Dmitry, and let me answer in Russian. Я думаю, что портрет Юрия Алексеевича Гагарина,
What I believe in is that
как и сам полет сейчас,
Yuri
это
Gagarin's
символ
portrait, just like
начала
spaceflight
космической эры.
itself, is the symbol of the early days of the space exploration era.
Россиянин.
So it's not just he's a Russian, he's a human that made the first ever step into the outer space which became a milestone for humankind at large. So this portrait is a symbol of the new era, and this person, who symbolizes the human assault into space, the first step into the space exploration endeavor. That's what's important about this portrait, and that's why we try to make sure that his portrait is in the picture with us when we do events like this.
Station, this is Houston ACR. That concludes questions from JSC PAO. Please stand by for a voice check from ESA.
ISS, this is ESA PAO in Brussels. How do you hear me?
We have you loud and clear. Welcome on board.
I introduce you now to Euronews anchor Alex Taylor.
Hello, welcome to iTalk. Some questions from our viewers here. ISS seems far away from everyday concerns. Can it actually bring us any health benefits? Are you doing research which can help us here who are on Earth? What are you doing to help us?
Well, I guess we all want to answer that question, was what we were saying amongst us. We're doing a lot of research on human beings, just finding out what happens to human beings in microgravity, and that pays off when we're trying to figure out how to go to Mars safely and be gone for longer. But it also has benefits back on Earth. One of the biggest ones that jumps out is bone loss, osteoporosis. We have about 10 times the rate of bone loss as your average osteoporotic 70-year-old woman. And so but we're a different kind of subject, and then we probably have simpler medical histories, and it's a little easier to study just that bone loss. And so we're doing different things, like I myself, for example, am taking some drugs that prevent osteoporosis, trying to understand how they interact with the body. We're looking at the loss of bone and also building bone back up. So I think that's a really important benefit. Also, a lot of cardiovascular studies, vestibular studies, understanding how our brains work. All these things bring information directly back home, because these problems, these bodily functions happen on Earth as well, but sometimes they're harder to understand until you put them in a very different environment.
Virgin Atlantic has launched a space program with paying guests. What do you actually feel about space tourists? Are they a hindrance? Is it good, space tourism, having people? I think 7 people have already paid to be on the ISS. What do you feel about that?
Well, I personally, I think the more people that could get the experience of looking back on Earth and seeing how beautiful it is, and seeing that we're all just riding on this fragile oasis through the solar system together, and that we're all in this together. I think the more people that can see that, I think the better off everybody's going to be. And we are all striving for that day when space travel is as frequent and as routine as airline travel. And NASA and ESA and all the other agencies that are involved at the International Space Station are going on to the next big thing and going on and exploring outside low Earth orbit and into the solar system. And so I think it's a logical step that more and more people should be able to experience it, and I think it's a good thing.
A question perhaps to Paolo Nespoli. Obviously, Euronews, we're interested in the European perspective. You've been doing Twitter, you're a photographer. What does it look like when you look at Earth from space? What's the most beautiful things you've seen, and what does Europe and perhaps Italy look like?
Well, Earth, it's a model. And it's interesting because it changes every moment. I mean, you look down and sometimes you cannot see anything at all. There are big oceans, clouds all over the place. And sometimes instead you see everything. And every time it shows itself in a different way, in a different light. The sun changes, the time of the day is different, the season is different, the angle of the sun, maybe there is a moon. I mean, it changes completely, and it's amazing to discover all these little areas, all the areas in the world, and see the peculiarity of each one of them. It's really, really interesting. And it's amazing the fact that I can take pictures and send it back to Earth, and people, I see the messages back on Twitter, and people are really amazed by the images, and they see this planet from the views up here, and it's just gorgeous.
And a very short answer, just in a minute, perhaps, Katie, can you tell us what are the effects on the body? Is it difficult to keep your hair in place, for example? And why do you have long hair? Would it not be easier to cut the hair?
Well, you can ask my crewmates if I should cut my hair or not. It's actually impossible to keep it in place, except maybe in a ponytail. But, it looks very big, but, whenever I move, it moves with me. So I actually am never even aware of it until I look in a mirror or see a picture on camera. And everything else up here is different and yet perfectly doable. Paolo has a great example of just learning to look at our world in a zero-gravity way instead of the way we do on Earth. We were trying to rearrange literally our dining room up here where we eat together and use the space in a nice way to interact together. And our table was just too big. It just didn't fit. And Paolo figured out that our table didn't have to be in this orientation like on Earth because nothing's going to fall off of it. And so our table is like at a slant, almost vertical. And in fact, everything will float away from it unless we have Velcro on there to put all of our little food packages.
Station, this is Houston ACR. That concludes questions from ESA PAO. Please stand by for a voice check from CSA PAO.
Station, Montreal. This is Bob Thirsk and several journalists at the Canadian Space Agency. How do you hear?
Hi, Bob. This is Station. We read you loud and clear.
Hi, Peter Ray from the Canadian Press. 50 years ago, there was a Cold War when Yuri Gagarin went up there. I'm just wondering, we can solve, it seems like you're able to work peacefully up in space, but back down on the Earth, there's still political issues. And moving forward, I understand China is going to get into the race. Are we going to get into another space race starting now? So that's sort of a two-pronged question. Dimitri and anybody else from... I guess maybe Catherine.
Okay, I'll answer in Russian. Да, действительно, первые годы освоения космического пространства.
That is correct. The early years of space exploration
Первые годы существовала космическая гонка, и это больше было
were the years of the space race. It was a matter of political prestige for a nation. And now, in our day and age, the International Space Station constitutes a great example of cooperation in the area of space exploration. So the upcoming large-scale space projects that will lead us onwards and upwards to the Moon, to Mars, and other planets of the solar system. All of these, I believe, will be international, because international cooperation has proven its feasibility, its efficiency, its viability, because every nation can contribute their technologies, their knowledge bases, their experience, their vision to the future development of manned spaceflight.
I think that's a really good question to ask today, where we're celebrating two anniversaries. Obviously, the 50th anniversary of the first human spaceflight by Yuri Gagarin and the first shuttle launch. And, in both those cases, they were basically one nation in a space race against each other in a somewhat antagonistic competition. And, you look at us today, the 6 of us on board representing the 15 nations of the International Space Station Partnership and representing all the nations of the world, really, and you see where we've come. And I think, even at the height of the Cold War, somehow these two nations that weren't always the best of friends, Russia and the U.S., found a way to cooperate in the space program via Apollo-Soyuz. So I think, one of the legacies of the space program over the past 50 years of human spaceflight is international cooperation. I think it's a good example of it. And another anniversary that we're recognizing is 10 years of Canadarm2, which basically built the space station that we're in right now. So it's a wonderful time to think back where we've came from and hopefully where we're going.
Sabrina Marandola from CBC in Montreal. I'm wondering two things. First off, is there a special routine or something that you do differently in space on a daily basis that you didn't do back at home? And part two, did you do anything special today to mark the anniversary?
Ну, наверное, по большому счету мы занимаемся примерно теми же делами на Земле и в
we do
космосе.
just
То
about the
есть
same
мы с утра
stuff,
встаем,
whether we're on Earth or on
умываемся,
orbit.
чистим зубы,
We wake up in the morning,
бреемся,
we get dressed, we
не
brush our
забываем
teeth,
про
we
завтрак,
shave,
обед и ужин.
try to make sure we have our
Конечно,
meals, our
стараемся
breakfast,
обустроить
lunch, and
уют
dinner,
твою
and of course
каюту.
try to make sure that our living quarters are
Конечно,
a
есть
comfortable
отличия в
place to
земной
be.
жизни. То, что
Of course, there
здесь
are
мы
differences
находимся
here.
24 часа в сутки находимся на работе.
First and
И
foremost, we're here on
всегда
duty,
готовы
on
к
active duty
нештатным
24/7. We're
ситуациям,
always ready to
которые
take on
могут возникнуть.
off-normal situations as they may come to
Которые,
be.
к счастью, у нас
Luckily,
не возникают. Но
there
всегда
haven't been
мы
any
к ним
for us
готовы.
yet, but nevertheless, we are ready.
François Gay from Collect
Ну, а
Space.
сегодня у нас...
During your training at Star City, during your training at Star City, you had
Ну, а
opportunity
сегодня...
to be in contact with artifacts related to the flight of Vostok 1 and Yuri Gagarin. Which of those artifacts made the strongest spiritual connection with you? And Catherine, will you play a fluted homage at one point?
Yeah, I'm afraid the comm was broken. You need to repeat your question.
During your training at Star City, you had opportunities to be in contact with artifacts related to the flight of Vostok 1 and Yuri Gagarin. Which of those artifacts made the strongest spiritual connection with you? And Catherine, will you record a fluted homage at one point?
Well, I'd like to think that every time I play up in the cupola, looking out over the Earth and actually looking out over the space station as well, I'm paying homage to the efforts of so many people who have made space flight happen. You know, today is a day where 30 years ago it was the first space shuttle flight. 50 years ago, Yuri Gagarin made his very famous flight, and people first left the planet. And the fact that I can do what I love to do in the evening in my free time is my way to pay homage to them. And I'll let others talk about the artifacts.
Well, training in Star City is, I wouldn't say an adventure, it's an experience per se. I mean, I felt like I was walking on the same streets, on the same place where many cosmonauts have trained. Yuri was there too. I felt I was kind of walking on the steps of history there, and that has been the things that have most inspired me. Being there in Star City, sitting at the desk, the same desk and same office that Yuri Gagarin had, and thinking that these guys 50 years ago, with the technology and the knowledge that they had 50 years ago, were able to go in space and go out of this world. That was surely an accomplishment.
Station, this is Houston ACR. That concludes questions from CSA PAO. Please stand by for a voice check from JAXA.
Station, this is JAXA PAO. How do you hear me?
JAXA PAO, this is station. We have you loud and clear. Welcome on board the International Space Station.
Okay, first of all, on behalf of the Japanese people,
I would like to ask a short message for Japanese people who is suffering pain from the earthquake and the tsunami. It would encourage us a lot.
Та трагедия, которая потрясла весь мир, то страшное природное, тот страшный природный катаклизм, который
the horrible natural disaster
по островной
that
Японии,
struck the
отозвался болью в
island nation of
сердце
Japan
каждого россиянина,
caused a lot
потому
of pain
что
in every
мы
Russian's heart.
соседние государства,
Since we are neighbor
мы
nations,
находимся очень близко друг
we're
к
real
другу,
close to each other.
Эта беда может
And
легко
this
случиться и на нашей
tragedy
территории.
can easily happen and impact
Вместе
our
оскорбим
territory
по
as well.
погибшим и поддерживаем вас
We
в эту трудную минуту.
Suffer along with you,
Мы
and
хотим
we
передать привет
show you
своим
all
коллегам,
the
друзьям
support
из
in
Японии и
this
поддержать
day of grief, and we
тех,
want
у
to
кого
send
погибли
our
близкие,
support to
друзья и
all the Japanese
родственники.
people, all those who have lost their families and
Но
friends.
не нужно забывать, что сегодня
Let's not forget
день первого
that
полета
today
человека в космос.
we're celebrating the anniversary of the first manned flight. And I want to congratulate everybody on this great occasion, wish you all the best, and try to keep it in your minds and in your hearts that we're always going to be there and do anything for you. Thank you.
And I would also like to add to what Alexander said. We are right now in the beautiful and very, very capable Kibo laboratory that was built by many, many people in Japan over the course of over 20 years. And, we wanted to say that the strength of our international partnership lies in the fact that we are all together in the good times and the bad times, and we support each other. And the example that I'd like to give is during the Space Shuttle Columbia tragedy, how all the partners of our international partnership stood together, stood with the United States, and together we all prevailed through that, and we continue to construct the International Space Station. And today we stand with our partners from JAXA and with the Japanese people in dealing with the tragedy in their country. And we want to know that we are all with you, and if there's, where our hearts go out to everybody in Japan, and, whatever we can do, we would like to do from orbit, and, for all the people of Japan. And it's just a great honor to be here in the Japanese laboratory on the International Space Station on this wonderful day where we celebrate 50 years of human spaceflight and how all the nations of the world come together in this wonderful endeavor called space exploration.
Station, this is Houston ACR. Thank you. That concludes the event.